Hey guys, what's up? It's Darkmek here and welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my Shadowlands guide for the Brewmaster monk in the exact same way I did on the DK. I'm going to split this up into two parts, and the reason being is that there's so much uncertainty at the moment around tuning around legendaries, soulbinds, and covenants. Including that in the video at the moment would just be a waste of time. So part one, same as the DK, we're going to cover off Stagger, Brews, abilities, talents, rotation, the AoE cap effect on Brewmasters, pre-patch and Shadowlands. We're going to talk about stats, enchants, and dual wielding or using a two-handed weapon. So, we're going to start this off talking about Stagger. So Stagger is pretty much the foundation of the Brewmaster. It's the reason it's been such a strongly favoured pick for progression rating and even more recently, high keys and Mythic Plus situations. So, how does Stagger work? So each time you get hit with an attack, it gets portioned up. So one part of that hit will hit you immediately, and the other part of that hit or the other portion of that damage is put into a dot, or it goes into what's called the Stagger pool. So your agility determines how much damage hits you immediately. The more damage you have, the less damage you take in the upfront immediate hit. So the dot, or the Stagger pool as we'll call it, is the remaining portion of that damage which gets converted into a 10-second dot, or a 13-second dot if you take Bob and Weave as a talent. Stagger also functions on magic damage, so for Brewmasters it's at 35% effectiveness, which means that you'll still take a larger portion of that damage up front, and then less gets converted into that dot, 10 seconds or 13 seconds with Bob and Weave. So that's a really brief rundown on Stagger. Brews. So Brewmasters manage their damage intake via two brews, Celestial Brew and Purifying Brew. If you're coming back in the pre-patch, you'll notice that Iron Skin Brew is gone now, and Celestial Brew is the new mechanic around this. So, Purifying Brew. This clears 50% of the damage that you delayed with Stagger. You have two charges of this brew on a 20-second recharge for each brew, and the cooldown is reduced by Keg Smash and Tiger Palm casts. Purifying Brew increases the size of your next Celestial Brew by providing stacks of purified chi when it's used. 1 stack is given for clearing Light Stagger, 2 stacks is given for clearing Moderate Stagger, and 3 stacks is given for Heavy Stagger. So it caps out at 10 stacks, which can last for 15 seconds, or which lasts for 15 seconds. These stacks at 10 will provide you an absorption via your Celestial Brew for 200% of your attack power. It's also modified by versatility. Celestial Brew was the new addition to Brewmasters, as I mentioned before, in pre-patch Shadowlands, and it's basically the return of Guard. The old good one that Brewmasters used to have. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, and because it's a brew, its cooldown is also reduced by Keg Smash and Tiger Palm, so it'll work out to be around a 25-second cooldown if you were sort of getting your Keg Smash on cooldown and Blackout Kick. What's cool about Celestial Brew is its interaction with your other mitigation, Purifying Brew. So when you purify any Stagger damage, that damage increases the absorption of your next Celestial Brew. So the higher Stagger when you purify, the larger the absorb your Celestial Brew is going to be, capping out at 200% as I mentioned above. So the bad news about Celestial Brew though is that it's on the global cooldown, which honestly doesn't feel great. Having a defensive tied to the GCD never feels great, but this one does make it feel a little bit clunky when you require it. With Iron Skin Brew being removed on the monk, you've gone from having 4 charges of brews, down to 2. So with Celestial Brew interacting with Purifying Brew, it means that you're going to be pressing Purifying Brew a lot more than you've been used to, and you'll basically want to continually cycle your Purifying Brew charges. So you won't want to be sitting on 2. You will always want to have 1 recharging, and it means that you'll also be purifying around every, sort of 5 seconds or so. You'll be hitting Purifying Brew, so it's a bit of a change to get used to. Moving into the ability side of things, so again, I've broken these up. So we're going to start with baseline abilities. So Keg Smash. So you smash a keg of brew on the target, dealing damage to all enemies within 8 yards, reduces their movement speed by 20% for 15 seconds, and it deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. It also grants Shuffle for 5 seconds and reduces the cooldown on your brews by 3 seconds. Blackout Kick, this deals physical damage and grants you 3 seconds of shuffle. Tiger Palm, this is basically your single target filler ability. It also reduces the remaining cooldown on your brews by 1 second. Breath of Fire, breathe fire on the targets in front of you. The targets that are affected by Keg Smash will also take extra fire damage, and they'll deal 5% reduced damage to you for 12 seconds. Spinning Crane Kick, this is turned into your AoE filler ability now that it's back in the kit. Its damages up to 6 enemies within 8 yards and grants you 1 second of shuffle. It's worth mentioning at the moment, and I'll go into it when we get into the rotation, but Spinning Crane Kick at the moment is actually doing more single target damage than Tiger Palm. You can kind of choose to leave these out, and it's not really necessarily for the continuation on shuffle, but at the moment, Spinning Crane Kick is kind of the best filler that you can be using. Touch of Death, you exploit an enemy's target's weakest point, instantly killing them. Only usable on creatures that have less health than you. Touch of Death deals damage equal to 35% of your maximum health against players and strong creatures under 15% health. It clears stagger damage based on 200% of the damage dealt. It's not amazing, but it's certainly nice to see this in the Brewmaster's toolkit. It's something extra for them in the way of an offensive cooldown. It'll see use in execute phases and Mythic Plus. Purifying Brew, so we went over this before, clears 50% of your damage that you delayed with Stagger and increases your absorption on Celestial Brew. Celestial Brew, drinking this brew creates a Celestial Guard around you, which can be amplified by purifying your Stagger. Crackling Jade Lightning, this is a range attack. You'll use it if you want to ever grab mobs at range, and that's about it. Vivify, this is a healing spell that you can cast on yourself when required. Provoke, this is your taunt. The unique thing about Brewmaster's Taunt Provoke is that it will cause your taunted target to move 50% faster or with 50% increased speed towards you. Passive abilities, Stagger. So we covered off at the start, splits a portion of your incoming damage up into an immediate hit and then a dot afterwards, 10 seconds as a default, 13 seconds if Bob and Weave is talented. Shuffle, this is a passive source of Stagger that increases the effectiveness of your Stagger by 100%. You gain Shuffle by using Keg Smash, Blackout Kick, and Spinning Crane Kick. Remember though, you can keep 100% uptime on Shuffle just by Keg Smashing off cooldown and using Blackout Kick. Mastery Elusive Brawler. Each time you are hit by a melee attack or hit with Blackout Kick, you gain a stacking 8% increased dodge chance until your next successful dodge. Also increases your attack power. Mystic Touch. Your damage weakens the target, increasing their physical damage taken by 5%. Celestial Fortune, you have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to be healed for an additional 65% of the amount healed. What this means is that whenever you get healed as a Brewmaster, be it a self-heal or any incoming heal from a healer, any source, it can be affected by Celestial Fortune, which as a result can give you an additional 65% of that heal. So this makes Brewmasters quite strong. Your Celestial Brew will also have an interaction with Celestial Fortune as well, and your crit will also increase the absorption size of that shield. Gift of the Ox, when you take damage, you have a chance to summon a healing sphere visible only to you. Moving through the healing sphere heals you for 150% of your attack power. Last passive, Brewmaster's Balance, so your armor is increased by 25%. So they're the passives. Moving into your defensive toolkit as a Brewmaster, Invoke Nijao or Angry Dave. This summons an effigy of Nijao, the Black Ox, for 25 seconds. He attacks your primary target and frequently stomps, damaging all nearby enemies, also dealing 25% of stagger damage you have recently purified to surrounding enemies. Yeah, it's a nice little AoE damage ability you get from him as well. And while he's active as well, you get 25% of damage delayed by Stagger is also staggered by Nijao. So it's a nice little cooldown to have back as baseline. Fortified Brew. This turns your skin to stone for 15 seconds, increases your current maximum health by 15%, and increases the effectiveness of Stagger by 10%, and reduces all damage you take by 15%. Expel Harm, this has been reworked from BFA, and it's basically now a free small heal on a 5-second cooldown. It also deals 10% of the amount healed as nature damage to the enemies within 8 yards. So now you can use this as a small flat heal without orbs up, or you can build orbs up to increase the amount of healing you receive and the amount of damage dealt via Expel Harm. Zen Meditation, it's highly situational, but it has huge application in places where you can actually get value from it. So it's a 60% damage reduction for 8 seconds. The catch is if you get meleeed, the channel breaks. So in BFA, we saw huge application with this on Shadow of Zul, where you would get out of range, and then you would Z-Med and you would take like 6 casts of the Shadow Bolts from Zul. So where it can be used, it has really good value. You can also use it on telegraphed singular boss abilities. If you can use Zen Med to absorb one of those abilities on a timer, you can get real value from it in that case as well. Utility on the Brewmaster, Spearhand Strike, this is your interrupt. It's a melee interrupt, so you do have to be in melee range to get the interrupt off. Clash, you and your target charge at each other, meeting halfway, then rooting all targets within 6 yards for 4 seconds. Roll, this is a signature monk ability. You can roll forwards, backwards, you get 2 charges. Detox, this gives the monk the ability to remove poisons and diseases from friendly targets. This can be fairly beneficial in Mythic Plus. Paralysis incapacitates the target for 1 minute, damage breaks the effect. You can also use it as a pseudo interrupt if you need to. So moving into the talent side of things on the Brewmaster now. So row 15, Eye of the Tiger, Chi Wave, and Chi Burst. So Eye of the Tiger is pretty much going to be your default pick, I think, for Mythic Plus and raiding at the moment. Chi Wave can be good in large packs in regards to AoE damage. It can also have some pretty cool functionality applications in regards to pulling mobs through walls. We saw it a lot in Tol Dagor in regards to pulling Jez through the wall in MDI and things like that with Chi Wave. So there will be some of those kind of interactions coming out, but Eye of the Tiger is probably going to be the safest pick. Row 25, Celerity, Chi Torpedo, or Tiger's Lust. You get choice here in regards to sort of, whatever you want and whatever you require. If you require, extra mobility, sharp burst, then Celerity is really good. You get an extra charge of roll. Chi Torpedo will send you further and give you a speed boost after the roll or the torpedo. And Tiger's Lust is, probably the most favorable choice, I think, majority of the time. Gives you free from roots or snares, increases movement speed. You can also cast it on a slower party member, so you get the option from that side, and you still keep your 2 charges of roll with that selection as well. Row 30, Light Brewing, Spitfire, and Black Ox Brew. So 2 choices here pretty much between Light Brewing and Black Ox Brew. And I think Light Brewing is generally going to be the main way that you go with this. So Light Brewing is, it's a passive, which means there's no management around it. And generally, unless you have the ability to use Black Ox Brew off CD, you'll find that you'll be losing out in regards to the total amount of brews used through that encounter anyway. You can create really interesting things with Black Ox Brew though, around defensive strengths, in particular, big packs in Mythic Plus. If you're running Black Ox Brew, it would give you the ability to kind of get back-to-back Celestial Brews off. Though as stated, if you weren't sort of playing in those conditions, you weren't using it to that potential, you're just going to be losing out, I think, to Light Brewing. So I'd recommend Light Brewing on this row. Row 35, Tiger Tail Sweep, Summon Black Ox Statue, and Ring of Peace. With threat issues for tanks, especially at the moment in beta on Shadowlands, Black Ox Statue is actually quite great. You do need to be careful of your placement in things like Sanguine Depths and things like that. I've been caught out popping it in the middle of the walkways, and it pulls bats as they fly past or things through the wall. Hopefully that gets fixed up, but it is always a good option if you are struggling with threat, especially in the current climate. Ring of Peace, however, is probably the better pick. It's the default pick in some cases. It gives you a fantastic buffer when you're needing to kite, if you need to knock mobs off casts or channels. If you're dealing with fixes like Sanguine or Necrotic, it allows you to really get a break on that. So Ring of Peace is fantastic, but Summon Black Ox Statue around threat issues, which are at the moment, is really nice as well. Row 40, Bob and Weave, Healing Elixir, and Dampen Harm. So this is an interesting role. I spoke a little bit about Bob and Weave before, without sort of really talking about it in any great detail. Bob and Weave extends your stagger dot by 3 seconds. So it doesn't change the damage that you are staggering, so to speak. It just changes the time over which that damage is staggered. So it means a lower damage taken per second. It's a good talent that's just locked behind a passive. It has a mindless defensive benefit to it. You just pick it and you continue playing the exact same way. Dampen Harm, on the other hand, is a really nice option for an extra cooldown. Brewmasters, generally speaking, they lack in that defensive cooldown department. Fortified Brew is a long cooldown, and then that's kind of it for them. So Dampen Harm gives you another cooldown on a 2-minute CD, and it comes in handy if there's an ability that deals a very large amount of damage up front, or if you just need it from a plain survival standpoint, because you might be pugging dungeons and kicks that need to be interrupted aren't, and things like that, or mobs aren't being stunned when they should. So it gives you access to another cooldown. So both have merit and both are quite good picks. Row 45, Special Delivery, Rushing Jade Wind, and Exploding Keg. So Rushing Jade Wind Rushing Jade Wind is probably by large the default option here, and it's going to probably be your best pick. Provides consistent damage both in single target and AoE. It's also nice for AoE threat, and then generally that's going to push it ahead of both of these other choices. Special Delivery might see some use in Mythic Plus. It was a play in Freehold in BFA. And Exploding Keg Smash, while it's nice to see that Legion ability back, it offers, a good burst of AoE. I don't think it would be a better pick than Rushing Jade Wind. Row 50, High Tolerance, Celestial Flame, and Blackout combo. High Tolerance, again, is the safe and default pick here. You gain an extra 5% value from your stagger, and you get 15% haste, which also goes into reducing your brew cooldowns. Celestial Flame is the new talent, and I don't think it will really see any sort of gameplay in its current iteration. Blackout combo is a good defensive option in regards to getting a faster recharge on your brews if you're able to combo every keg smash. It's most likely, though, not going to be a better pick than High Tolerance. And again, with High Tolerance, you get the flexibility in your rotation. It's a passive. You just play like normal. Blackout combo, I think if you were making sort of any mistakes, would have an ability to fall behind that. Rotation-wise, so Brewmaster, if anything, in Shadowlands has been further simplified around how you go about controlling your brews, which is great news, especially if you're coming into the class. Basically, you never want to let Celestial Brew or Purifying Brew be sitting on cooldown whilst you are tanking. So you need to get used to hitting Purifying Brew a lot more than usual. You do not want to be sitting at 2 charges of Purifying Brew whilst you are in combat. You basically always want to have one on recharge. And as I said, you'll be pressing them around every 5 seconds. And then the same with your Celestial Brew. You'll be using your Purifying Brews to pull for a larger absorption on the Celestial Brew, and you'll be using that off cooldown as well. So outside of your brews and abilities, you're going to flow in a priority order. So you're going to be using your Keg Smash off cooldown. Remember, we grant shuffle from that as well. You're going to be using Blackout Kick off cooldown. Again, remember, shuffle from that as well. Then Breath of Fire, then Rushing Jade Wind, and then you will be filling the gaps with Tiger Palm on single target or Spinning Crane Kick if you have more than 3 targets. Now, it's worth noting that Tiger Palm reduces your brew cooldowns. So with Tiger Palm, in regards to a defensive benefit, that is going to be the better filler if you are aiming for a defensive standpoint. However, at the moment, Spinning Crane Kick is dealing more damage single target than Tiger Palm. So if you don't need the defensive benefit from Tiger Palm, you can be filling your gaps with Spinning Crane Kick in all situations. So you want to be keg smashing on cooldown, the reason being it's a lot of damage, it's a lot of threat, especially in AoE situations, but it also reduces the cooldown on Celestial Brew and Purifying Brew and grants you that 5 seconds of shuffle. Blackout Kick on cooldown, this helps continue your shuffle. It grants you another 3 seconds of shuffle on each use. Your Breath of Fire, remember, targets affected by Keg Smash will deal 5% reduced damage to you for 12 seconds. Rushing Jade Wind, when talented, obviously, it's easy to keep up 100% of the time. It's a decent boost to single target and AoE damage and threat. You want to avoid capping, as I mentioned, and using your fillers with energy on Tiger Palm or Spinning Crane Kick, and I went over them before. Expel Harm, you can weave this into the kit when you need a heal. Remember that it's a flat, small heal with no orbs. You're also getting a little bit of damage out of it as well. In regards to the Touch of Death, when they get into execute range, you'll be using that. Nejao as well, pretty much when you're going into AoE packs, you're going to want to be using that off CD when you are pulling large as well, or just even on single target, you want to be using it off CD if it's a raid encounter. Energy isn't overly a dramatic thing to monitor. You just always want to make sure that you've got enough energy to keg smash as soon as it's off CD. That's pretty much the most important thing. And as I said, just weaving your Tiger Palms or your Spinning Crane Kicks in and around that sort of priority system I just spoke of, it's not really too hard to manage. So the AoE cap that you will no doubt be playing with in pre-patch at the moment, and the effect it's had on Brewmasters. So the AoE cap has had a fairly large effect on Brewmasters due to basically every baseline AoE skill available to Brewmasters, either being hard capped on targets, soft capped with low damage scaling on secondary targets. So, Keg Smash. This is now subject to diminishing returns once you hit more than 5 targets. So it functions as normal AoE against 5 or fewer targets, and after that the damage decreases. Breath of Fire is subject to what's called square root scaling, so it deals full damage to the primary target and then divides AoE damage evenly among the secondary targets hit. Spinning Crane Kick, this is capped at 6 targets, and Rushing Jade Wind is also capped at 6 targets. So moving into the stats side of things for the Brewmasters, guys, and not a hell of a lot has changed. So item level, versatility, crit, and then haste and mastery and haste, I should say. So versatility, like on most tanks, is just too good a stat to go past. It reduces your incoming damage, it increases your damage output, and it also has an increase on your self-healing, making it just a triple threat stat, which is just too damn good. Critical Strike, think back to Celestial Fortune and how we talked about that interaction. Critical Strike increases your healing taken and also provides extra damage. So again, it's a really strong stat for Brewmasters. Mastery, this affects the passive we spoke about, Mastery Elusive Brawler. So it basically increases the percentage chance you've got to dodge the attacks as you stack your Mastery Elusive Brawler buff up. It also increases your attack power. Mastery is by no means a bad stat for Brewmasters whatsoever. You're just probably going to get more value out of versatility and crit. Haste increases your energy regeneration. It reduces the cooldown on Keg Smash. Haste generally has been the weakest stat to tunnel on Brewmasters. Not by a long shot or anything like that, but you will get more value out of the other stats we kind of just went over. You'll get your extra haste as well from High Tolerance, so don't forget that, which is also a decent boost just passively to your haste levels. So moving into the enchant side of things, rings. So Tenet of Versatility, permanently enchant a ring to increase your versatility by 16. Chest, 2 options. Eternal Stats permanently enchants a chest piece to increase all stats by 30. Or Eternal Skirmish, which permanently enchants your chest to increase your agility by 20. And your auto attacks will have a chance to deal additional shadow damage. Gloves, there's only a strength enchant out at the moment. Boots, Eternal Agility, permanently enchants your boots to increase your agility by 15. Cloak, permanently enchants a cloak to increase your stamina by 30. And then we move into weapons. So the 2 new weapon enchants that you will be seeing are Celestial Guidance. So this permanently enchants a weapon to sometimes increase your primary stats of agility for Brewmasters by 5% when attacking or using spells and abilities. The other one is Lightless Force, which permanently enchants a weapon to have a chance to send out a wave of shadow energy in front of you when you are using offensive spells and abilities. So, with the weapon enchant, we move into the weapon side of things. So dual wielding is now back in the options for Brewmaster. So the difference between dual wielding or using a two-hander is using a two-hander, your offensive abilities will hit harder. So there is the bonus from that side. The bonus from using dual wielding as Brewmaster is the access to a second weapon enchant. Now, on Shadowlands beta at the moment, you've just been running Lightless Force on both of your weapons and getting a fair bit of damage out of that by having access to the second weapon enchant. So, at the moment, it's looking like dual wielding will be the stronger option. You will obviously play to whatever, you have access to. If you have, a good two-hander, then that's what you'll be using at the moment. But it is looking like dual wielding will be the way to go just due to having access to the second weapon enchant. So we'll kind of have to wait and see, how things go as to how that progresses. But right now, as a standpoint during pre-patch, and beta, that is the best option for Brewmaster is going to be dual wielding just due to the weapon enchant factor. So that is pretty much it, guys. Hopefully I've covered everything off myself. I haven't played Brewmaster since Season 1 of BFA, and I'm coming back to it in pre-patch and Shadowlands, and I've been having a hell of a lot of fun on it. So the guide was, for me to learn and get myself up to speed, and then for anyone else that was coming back, I just thought it might have some value to make a guide for you if you were looking to get into the Brewmaster or you're returning to it and just wanted to know the changes and what you were supposed to do. So any questions, hit me up in the comments below, guys. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Come join the Discord, come say hi to me on Twitch. I'll see you all next time. See you, fam.